about. I'm not the greatest at public speaking, so bear with me here, folks. But before I start anything with my story, I'd like to just say thank you to April for what you've started here at the Wake. It's been a tremendous thing. I've had the pleasure of coming here since mid-December. And not only her, April, but everybody back there in the back that helps every week with the preparations of the food and serving and the setting up and tearing this stuff down, clean up. Got an amazing group of people that makes this thing happen every week, and I'm thankful to be a part of it. Thank you all. And I know she already introduced the band, but I wanted to say just a quick thing that, like I said, I started coming up here in mid-December for the purpose of playing with the band here and helping out. But what an awesome group of people that I get to enjoy every Thursday evening. Tyler Massey, this young man, has got to be one of the most talented musicians I've ever had the pleasure of playing with in my life. The dude is just absolutely phenomenal. And then we've got this young fella back here in the back, James, 15 years old, and keeping on that same path you're at because he's got a God-given talent. And he's got a very bright future with his musical abilities. And then, like April said, we get the pleasure of having a pastor from right here in town play with us. Not only that, he's a seasoned musician for a long time. And the best part about Keith that I like is the fact that now that he's in the band, I no longer have the tag of being the old guy. So, having said that, my name's Brad Snively. I'm from right here in Fayette County, born and raised. I've been, for 40 years of my life, pretty much dependent on something, somehow, some way, almost all the time. I've been a blundering drunk. I don't like to use the word addict, so I like to say I had a very intimate relationship with cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, you name it. But by the grace of God, I've been healed. And by the blood of Christ, I am cleansed, I am forgiven, I'm redeemed. And that is all that matters. Regardless of what anybody may say, you're not a product of your past. Never. So, like I said, we'll get started with born and raised here. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. I was the accident, I guess you would say. I'm a drinking microphone. No, my mother wasn't supposed to have any more children after my brother was born, so there's an 8-year gap between me and my next oldest brother, and then an 11-year gap between me and my oldest brother. So needless to say, by the time I was coming up, my parents were a little better off financially. They knew a little bit more. I was probably the spoiled brat in the family. So, imagine that. But I was always kind of a wild child, rebellious, whatnot. I could get away with more because Mom and Dad had already been through it twice, and it's like, yeah, we're kind of tired, yeah, whatever. And then I had 2 older brothers that looked out for me a lot as I was growing up. My oldest brother, he was always involved in church, always, did sports, well in school. He was the goody-goody, we would call him. But, I mean, he looked out for me a lot. I love and respect both of my brothers, but he was always there for me anytime I needed. My middle brother, the middle child, he was the one that, he was my earliest influence when it came to doing things I shouldn't, I guess. A lot of that, I guess. He turned me on to smoking marijuana the first time I did it, at the age of 12. And when I look back at that, I'm thinking, I've got grandchildren. My oldest grandchild is 12 years old, my granddaughter. And it really blows my mind. When I look at her, I see this sweet, innocent, little 12-year-old girl. And the very thought of her doing anything remotely close to what I was exposed to and what I was doing at that age, it breaks my heart and kind of sickens me. But that was my first experience with getting high. I was at 12 years old. So That would have been around sixth grade, fifth, sixth grade. My first time drinking was at the age of 13, again with my brother. So this started what was the beginning of pretty much a 40-year pattern of drug and alcohol abuse and use. And I mean, there was a lot of fun involved. When you're in the midst of it, doing it all the time, you're thinking you're having a great time, and I'm having a blast. And Sean Weary said in here one night better than anything. He said, "Yeah, it's a lot of fun until it's not, and when it's not is when it's too late for a lot of people." But like I said, I started at 12 years old. Every chance I could get. Me and some buddies, and most of the people I hung out with during that age, I had a handful of friends my age. We were all pretty much kind of the same, into the same things. But a lot of the people were several years older than me, so I had access to all kinds of stuff at a very early age. But my brother was, it was always there. My parents were gone a lot. My dad was a businessman. He worked at a factory here. He was a purchasing manager at Calmar here in town. So they would be out on business dinners on weekends a lot, so I would be left at home. And that was one of my brother and his buddies' fun things to do was, hey, well, let's give it to Bradley and see how he acts. I was a guinea pig on a lot of things, and they had fun with it. And like I said, looking back, I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and hang out with the cool kids, do whatever it was. And then, the alcohol came into it. Dad always had a fully stocked liquor cabinet that he rarely touched. I mean, he just wasn't one of those kind of people, so we would tear into it every time we got an opportunity. But it caused me problems through school. I flunked out in the sixth grade and had to repeat it because I didn't care about anything. Our thing in the morning was walk to school, smoke weed on the way to school, didn't care about any of it. And it led to just reckless, careless behavior throughout my adult life. Moving on into teenage years, my oldest daughter was born 3 weeks before I turned 18 years old. I moved out of my parents' house at the age of 17 on my own. I thought, I got this, I'm making it. I was managing a pizza place and thought I just had it all together. I grew up in a musical family. I played music all my life. At the age of 17, I was playing music in a band in bars and clubs. So that was, you're in the band, you're in the band here, you want to, we'll give you a beer, we'll give you a shot, whatever you want. It was easy. And it was just second nature. Didn't think anything about it. I'll never forget the time, I've been through. So I'm jumping around back. I made myself notes, but a friend of mine told me last night, said, skip the notes. It don't do you any good anyway. So I'm leaving it up here. So forgive me if I'm bouncing back and forth between things, but oldest daughter born before I turned 18, and that was a pretty rocky relationship that didn't last. On again, off again, but I had my oldest daughter with me at my brother's, drunk, drinking. I was staying with my parents at the time because we were on a off again moment. And she was a year old or less. And I remember my sister-in-law saying, Bradley, just stay here. You don't need to go. You don't need to go. It was only 5 miles. I'm good. I don't need to go. I don't need to stay here. I'm good. Don't leave me alone. So I put her in the front seat of my Monte Carlo in the car seat, not strapped in. Driving 5 miles to mom and dad's like this. And missed a curve. Went out in the ditch and the car seat went forward. And, God was with me that night because for whatever reason, I did not kill my infant child. Missed a telephone pole by 6 inches. Remember looking at the car the next morning, my mother and my aunt said, what did you do? why is all this grass up under your car? My little girl had a bump on her head. You would have thought that might have been enough to teach me a lesson. But no, that didn't do it. I mean, it was constant. But fortunately, thank the Lord, there was no other instances like that where my children were involved. But I ended up with 3 daughters in total, all of which have seen a multitude of things they shouldn't have had to growing up. My first marriage, I had custody of my 2 oldest children, and then had a 3rd child with the woman I was married to, so we raised 3 girls for 14 years pretty much. And the 2 oldest girls were treated differently than the youngest one because the baby, and it was hers, and the other 2 weren't. So my children went through a lot of things, and I relied on drugs and alcohol to kind of compensate and dull the pain, numb myself from whatever it was I didn't want to deal with. And that ended up being bad as well. I remember the first time I was exposed to cocaine was at the age of 16, once again with my older brother. And I thought that was just the marvelous thing in the world. But for about 10 years, that was one of those things that you would get to do very occasionally. If he was at the right place at the right time, he was lucky enough to get into that. But lo and behold, you meet people and you meet other people, and then you've got connections to where you can get your hands on it anytime you want. And then that became a problem. So here I am in my 30s, divorced, lost everything I'd had. My business was doing well. I had the world by the tail doing anything I wanted, but I lost it all because I was absorbed with getting high. I didn't care about anything. I've lived most of my life being the most self-absorbed, self-centered person you could imagine. I didn't care. I missed out on things with my children growing up. Ball games, sport events. Now I'm good. I'd be at the bar. I'd be hanging with my buddies or whatever it may be. It was just always more important to me. But there again, I can't count the times that God has been by my side, right there with me, in instances where things went a way that they could have entirely gone something totally different. But it's something you don't look at the time when you're in the midst of it. But yeah, in my 30s, divorced, living in my parents' basement with my 2 oldest daughters. Of course, they had their own rooms with grandma and grandpas. They had them. There again, I was shirking my responsibilities. I didn't care. It was just losing everything, losing my mind, losing my sanity. But I continued to keep medicating myself. I meet a woman, marriage number 2, lasted 11 months because I was just searching. I couldn't be alone. And I had a couple of relationships in between marriage number 1 and number 2. That's because I always felt the need I had to have somebody. I couldn't spend time alone. Can't be by myself. That's not acceptable. I'd always pick the wrong one though. Did my first weekend stay in jail in my 30s. That was the first of several, usually related to, never had to, related to either a OVI or some kind of a domestic altercation. But there were several overnight weekend stints in jail. The last one actually was about 25 days when it's all said and done. It's a pretty low point when you're then in your 40s and you have to call your dad to come and pick you up from jail after a domestic altercation, and it's your mother's birthday. he was real happy with that one. I'll never forget the look on his face, and he just looked at me and said, "Boy, if I had a nickel for every stupid thing you've done, I'd have a really great big bag full of nickels." We joked about that until the day he died. But it was true. I mean, I can't think of the disappointment, the letdown, not only to my parents, my kids, everybody. It's hard to fathom sometimes. Marriage number 3, once again, had this need that I could not be alone. Well, that one lasted a little bit longer, but there was some severe incompatibility issues there. And it was during that time that I started riding motorcycles. About 2011, 2012, I don't know. That ended up being a bad recipe too. You feel you're invincible. When you're out living the life and getting drunk and getting high all the time, you just think that, even when you're into your 40s, you think you're invincible. But there was another instance where God was by my side when I should have probably not been here. Because we started at 8 o'clock in the morning on a binge day, drinking, and 7 o'clock that evening, my buddy says, "Hey, let's take a motorcycle ride." And I said, "You know what, that's a great idea, let's do that." So we did. 50 miles, we're 50 miles into our trip, headed back home, and well, that was the last one, because I wrecked it and just about killed myself. And the biggest thing I was mad about was that state trooper took my driver's license out of my wallet while I was on the ground unconscious. And he would not let go of convicting me of an OVI. Like, what's the deal here, man? I didn't hurt anybody but myself. What do you want to convict? Didn't I go through enough already? Why do you want to convict me? Yeah, they did. That was OVI number 2. Sentence for that was 10 days in jail, ankle monitor for 60 or 90 days, something like that, I don't remember. But I go to do my 10 days in jail, and I had to go to a doctor, literally, to get a prescription for something to keep me from withdrawing from alcohol. Because at this point, I'm drinking whiskey by the fifths, beer nonstop. I mean, I could not go a day, I couldn't tell you how many years I went without having one day of altering my mind with something. It's like I said, thinking back on it, it's kind of hard to fathom, but it's a fact of life, and I know there's a lot of people that deal with it and struggle with it. But my 10 days in jail, and I had one day between before I was to get fitted with this ankle monitor I was forced to wear. And the ankle monitor senses alcohol, so you can't drink while you're on it. So I thought, you know what, I've got this last day, I'm going to take advantage of it before I have to strap this thing on, and we tied on a big one. Well, I'm on the way to get my monitor fixed the following day. We had a bad incident that night with my daughter wrecked her car. We had to spend the night in Columbus at a hospital. Thank God she was okay from that. But on my way to get my ankle monitor, the lady says, "I'm sorry, I don't have your paperwork. You can't come today." I tell my wife, "Well, we're already in Chillicothe. Why don't I just go visit my probation officer? Since I'm already here, and why waste a trip?" And I walk in there, and the first thing he notices was the smell of alcohol on my breath from 12 hours earlier. Was the last drink I had taken. And he says, "Well, you realize that being on probation, you're not supposed to drink at all." I said, "Oh, well, no, I didn't know that. I thought I had one last shindig before getting this ankle monitor." So he made me do a breathalyzer in his office, and lo and behold, I was still intoxicated 12 hours after I'd taken a drink. And I go right back into jail cell. So my 10-day sentence ended up being 20. And then I got my monitor on when I got out, but all I did was count minutes until it came off, and I could go right back at it. And during the time I wore it, I had kind of slacked off on marijuana, but during those 90 days, but that was all she wrote. I stayed stoned the entire time, just to keep my mind occupied from not being able to have a drink. So, needless to say that between the fines and fees and the loss of work at the time, that was quite an expensive ordeal. And you think I learned a lesson from that one? Nope. I should have. That one should have been the eye opener of all eye openers. I mean, I laid in an ICU unit for 5 days. I almost killed myself, but I didn't care. I still wanted to drink. And then after healing up from that, one of the best things in my life ever happened, and God placed my wife Lori into my life. That is the best thing that's ever happened to me at this time. And it was wonderful. Finally, somebody that understands, somebody that I'm compatible with. And we still are. But I clearly remember telling her at the early days, I said, you're going to wind up hating me. That's just how it goes. She's like, no, that never happened. No way, never happened. I said, you're going to wind up hating me. Fast forward almost 5 years, I find out she's almost on the verge of leaving because my drinking was so far out of hand. I mean, what choice does she have? But the thing about it is, she's got a passive personality. She's not, that was one of the things that I loved was, well, you know, I can sit here and I can slam this whole fifth down and she's not nagging at me. She's not giving me a hard time. She's not getting on my case. She's not on my back. I got it made. Well, no, it wasn't. She just didn't want to, wasn't worth it to her to do all that. He's going to do what he's going to do. No amount of nagging about it is going to change it. So here I'm thinking that I've got it made, but in the meantime, I'm just slowly driving her completely away. So, there you have it. I was reckless, careless, self-absorbed, self-centered. By this time, I'm back to a point where I'm dabbling around and liking cocaine again, that I'd stayed away from for many, many years. I tried, I don't know how many times with the alcohol. For years I knew there would be mornings I would wake up and I'd just see the look on my wife's face and I'm like, what did I do? Or what did I say? Because I know there was something. When I'm getting the look I'm getting and the silent treatment, I know, but I couldn't for the life of me remember. I mean, blackout drunk. There was a period of about 6 months. She had every weapon in the house hidden from me because she didn't know what I might do. I mean, I'm not going after anybody else, but I actually reached a point of brokenness and despair that I would never willingly try to take my life, but I was at a point where I didn't care if I woke up the next day. I would drink myself to a point where I don't care. If today's the day, then so be it. Maybe I don't want to wake up. I was in a desperation where I didn't care about tomorrow. Everything was just today, this moment, today only, and most importantly, it's about me. Nobody else matters, nobody else means a thing. It's all me. And living like that, like I said, that's been from the time I was 12 years old until I'm in my 50s. I can't recall a time of, I bet you there's probably not a solid month from the age of very early teenagers to in my 50s that I went more than a day without some kind of something altering my state of mind. And it just becomes normal. And yeah, there's a lot of fun there until it's not. And by that time, when it's got a hold of you, it's got a hold of you. And I did. I reached a point of just desperation. I tried. I told my wife, well, I'll quit. Okay, I'm going to lay off drinking. I'll quit. Well, I'll just quit drinking liquor and I'll just drink beer. Or I'll skip it on Tuesday and Thursday. Well, none of it worked. There wasn't a thing that worked. Nothing at all whatsoever would work. And I tried with all my heart, honestly. I tried myself to. I knew I was killing myself. I knew I was killing every relationship I had. And once again, that was more powerful to me than anything else in my life. Until August 28th last year, I came home from my normal day, knocked off work a little bit early and went to the bar. And that's another thing, that God was with me at so many times that I couldn't count, because there wasn't hardly a day I didn't drive around. I drove for 4 years without a driver's license. Luckily, I mean, I could have been sitting in prison for all the times, the stupidity that I did that I got away with. But August 28th last year, I come home from my normal day, and my wife and I decide to sit down and watch a movie. Going through Netflix, and Big George Foreman, the movie about George Foreman and his life. Watching that, and there's a scene in the movie where he's fighting, I forget which fighter he was fighting, but when he comes back to the locker room, he collapses on the ground. And the trainers and everybody around him think that he's dead. They're waiting on medics to get in there because they think they just lost Big George Foreman. And he stays down a few minutes, and the next thing you know, he jumps up and runs and jumps in that shower, and he says, I just met Jesus. And there was something about that scene in that movie that talked to me. And it made me start thinking more and more. And I thought about that whole evening until I went to bed. And it was tugging at me. It was just tugging and tugging at me, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And I hit my knees and prayed to God that night for all of the things, everything that I tried to do myself, because I always had that attitude, that ego, I can fix this. I've got this. I don't need help. I don't need anything. Well, we all need God. We all need God. Because that night, I prayed to God like I've never prayed in my life. And He answered me. I woke up the next morning, and I was different. I knew this. I could feel it. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I know that day I didn't have a drink. I know that I've not had a drink since that day. I've not had anything altering. I continued with marijuana for about another 4 or 5 weeks after I stopped drinking. And the day I got baptized, I came home from church and I said, wasn't anything I was willingly trying to give up or anything like that. I said, I don't need that. I've got Jesus. I don't need to pollute my brain with anything when you've got the power of God in your life. And I mean, there's a lot of people that know me. There's a lot of people that still don't believe it, and I'm sure there's people that are probably still have bets on when I'm going to slip and fail. But I can testify to the fact that I've never in my life been able to, if I've never been able to do that, then there's something there far greater than anybody can begin to imagine, and it's God. It is, because I tried and failed miserably time and time again, and all I did was ask for it. It was that simple. And I've struggled with that as well, I said, well, man, why me? How is it possible that, all of this, He just gave it to me that easily. I asked for it and it was given. And a good friend of mine put it to me, I said, I almost feel guilty because I see so many people that struggle, that deal with it and battle it on a daily basis. And she's like, you were broken. And that's about the only way I can think of putting it. I mean, yes, it was given easy, but when I look back at the history that finally led up to it, I mean, it was it was a long time coming. I didn't just get it overnight, but I just finally reached a point of brokenness and a point of willing to give it all. Not just part of, not just 1 foot in the water. You got to go all the way. And when I finally reached that point and did that, he answered. And all I can say is from that day forward, my life has grown so much better. My relationship with my wife is better than anything I could ever ask for. My relationship with my children, my grandchildren, my family, just everything. Every part of life just seems to have gotten better. And I know without doubt there's no looking back. There's no looking back from this, because that's a life changer. And folks, that's my story.